Welcome, everyone, to this session number 8 of the HJI International Conference on Peace and Public Leadership, addressing the challenges of our time. I'm Thomas Walsh, president of HJI. Some of you have perhaps attended the earlier sessions of our conference. They've gone extremely well. They've covered a wide range of topics, and there's been good participation and a lot of good discussion. Just to let you know, the bios of each speaker will appear in your chat column, and I won't be giving more extended bios in my introduction of each speaker, so refer to the chat column. We have 4 speakers, and I'll go through them one by one. Each will have 12 minutes. I believe they're all going to use a PowerPoint presentation. And as they conclude their presentation, I'll come on and probably ask maybe just one follow-up question for each speaker. And then after all 4 have spoken, which we expect to take the first hour, we'll use the remainder of the time for some further discussion, drawing from questions that you as our audience and participants should enter your comments and questions into the chat column. So thank you again for joining, and I hope this will be a stimulating session. The topic is the future of the United Nations, and the 4 speakers are all graduate students. I would say brilliant graduate students here at HJI. We have a course on the United Nations and civil society, and they have demonstrated excellent work, and I think you'll see that as they speak. But let me proceed. Our first speaker is Mr. Avo Martinsson. He's, again, a graduate student at HJI International Graduate School for Peace and Public Leadership. He'll be speaking to us from Estonia. Avo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walsh. Let me share the screen. Okay, yes, thank you, Dr. Walsh, for a kind introduction and hosting this special panel about the United Nations. I did my research paper on the topic of reforming the United Nations Security Council and would like to present you a very basic overview. First of all, what is the main role of the Security Council? Chapter 5, Article 24 states, the Security Council primary responsibility is the maintenance of international peace and security. And Chapter 6, Article 33, the parties to any dispute shall first of all seek a solution by negotiation, inquiry, mediation, negotiation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort to regional agencies or arrangements, or other peaceful means. Now, why are reforms needed? As a distinct product of history, now 7 decades past, its 5 permanent members, China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, and United States, as chief victors from World War II, continue to enjoy an unrivaled status and level of influence in the primary UN body for maintenance of international peace and security. Some countries that have served several times in the Security Council say that Security Council is flawed, unjust, and anti-democratic institution whose shortcomings are baked into the structure of contemporary multilateralism. As its legitimacy wanes, the temptation and incentives for dissatisfied countries to bypass it are likely to become greater and more understandable. Representativeness. In the beginning, there were 5 permanent seats and 6 non-permanent seats, so in total 11 members. UN itself had 51 member states. After 20 years, amendment of charter took place and 4 additional member seats were created, making total 15 members. In 2024, permanent seats have remained the same since founding and non-permanent seats since 1965, but UN member states have quadrupled. Africa has no permanent seat, same goes for Latin America and Caribbean. Asia have only 1 seat, so for 141 countries, there is only 1 seat in the P5. P5 veto power remains a source of concern among the broader UN membership and civil society, as well as a chief reason for the Security Council paralyzes when its leadership has been most needed to prevent or halt the outbreak of violent conflict or mass atrocities. This graphic shows how many vetoes have been cast in 5-year interval before and after the enlargement of the CC in 1965. Andrei Golosovsky, who served as a permanent representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations, said, "The veto provision is designed to push the Council's 5 permanent members toward common ground, while also protecting them from Security Council decisions that might run contrary to their national interests. The Council has often failed to fulfill its assigned task of maintaining peace." And he continues, "Faced with the growing demand for Council reform, any P5 member will inevitably have to consider the risks to its interest, to its role in the world, and to its ability to block Council resolution it opposes. This is certainly true for Russia, whose Soviet predecessors set the standard for veto use. Example, on 25th of February 2022, Russia vetoed the resolution in the Security Council which would have condemned Russia's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine and called on Moscow to withdraw. It's widely accepted that the Russian Federation egregiously violated the charter when it invaded Ukraine in February and then blocked the Council's ability to address the situation. On the other hand, a week later in the UN General Assembly, 141 member states voted in favor of a resolution demanding an immediate halt to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, while only 5 states voted against, thus sending a clear message of international solidarity with Ukraine. The UN Security Council voted on September 30, 2022 on a resolution not to recognize Russia's annexation of territories in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. As a permanent Security Council member, Russia used its veto to block the Council from acting to address the crisis. That spurred Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to challenge the body to act or dissolve itself altogether. This solution is unlikely, but the paralysis has given new ammunition to those who demand change. He said also, where is the security that Security Council needs to guarantee? What about some possible ways to reform? For amendment to take place, 2/3 of the members of General Assembly, including P5, must vote for it and be ratified in their respective constitutional process. UN Charter has been amended only 5 times in nearly 80 years of time. Joseph Schwarzenberg, in his book Transforming the United Nations System, Designs for a Workable World, recommends representation in Security Council based on 12 world regions instead of individual nation states. Secondly, he proposes a mathematically determined weighted vote for each region. Lastly, in exchange for phasing out the veto, the P5 would receive a larger weighted vote in an empowered General Assembly. Challenge with this idea is that UN consists of single member states and not regions. The 2015 report on the Commission on Global Security, Justice and Governance also presents 6 points. Members defending no votes publicly. The option of casting dissenting vote that does not rise formally to the level of veto and thus does not block passage of a resolution. ensuring adequate resources and political support for new peace operations, consulting a group of friends for each peace operation to exert political and diplomatic pressure, consulting troop and police contributing countries when issues arise, and conducting a rolling analysis of elements influencing the context of peace and operations. Now, this is, let's a little bit widen the case. Founders of the Universal Peace Federation and HJI International, Dr. Sun Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, made a proposal 24 years ago in UN office in New York to create an international assembly to serve as a Senate or Council within the United Nations, that each country appoints a religious ambassador to the United Nations to serve as a member of the religious assembly. Their purpose and mission would prohibit their promoting the narrow interests of a particular country, and they would serve as conscientious guardians of lofty ideals such as justice, security, and peace. There are different groups that are working towards expansion of the Security Council. Those groups are G4, Brazil, India, Japan, Germany, Uniting for Consensus Coalition, including Argentina, Mexico, Italy, Poland, Pakistan, South Korea, and Turkey, and African Union, consisting 54 member states. All of them have slightly different view to the expansion of Security Council and veto power. Here are some of the claims why G4 countries should be permanent members of Security Council, and on the right you can see the countries who do not support them. Issues. So what should be considered for the country to become part of the Security Council? National GDP, population, defense expenditure, relationship with neighboring countries, votes from other nations. According to Matthias Spector, no administration has published a white paper that outlines the contours of the country's reform proposal, lays out the principles for enlargement, or grapples with the issue of regional representation or the veto. Nor have there been any statements on how an expanded council would cope with the question of effectiveness. Also, there is no clear consensus on how many countries should consist Security Council. What should the regional distribution be? Who should have veto power and who not? Enlargement of Security Council might not make it automatically more effective. While enlargement can enhance the democratic nature of the Council by representation, too many members may reduce the efficiency of its decision-making and its ability to act with urgency. Not every country inherently has the capacity to maintain peace when it joins the Security Council. Not does the size and strength of security directly correlate with high or low capacity for peace. Historically, at certain times and on certain issues, even members of P5 have destroyed rather than defended peace and security. The question of how to make the Council membership representative while still ensuring that it can sufficiently and competently maintain world peace and security is core dilemma for would-be reformers. Security Council legitimacy crisis owes less to its lack of representativeness than to the unevenness with which its resolutions are implemented and to the tendency of its most powerful members to bypass the Council entirely in favor of unilateral action. Opponents lobby against major candidates, Pakistan against candidacy of India, Argentina and Mexico against Brazil, Italy and Spain against Germany, Algeria against Egypt, Kenya against Nigeria or South Africa. China opposes the accession of Japan and India. It also appears unconvinced of the merits of Germany's accession, which would put the third permanent member from Europe to the Council. Russia is opposed to the accession of both Germany and Japan. Conclusion. There are various groups like G4, United for Consensus, and African Union, who are all interested in the enlargement of the Security Council. Yet there are regions and countries that are blocking each other ways to become part of Security Council. So it shows that the process of enlargement is not going to be fast and easy process. There is no guarantee that it succeeds. Procedural changes could enhance such limited reform, like the recent General Assembly resolution requiring a formal meeting after a permanent member casts a veto to debate the matter. Moreover, Security Council inaction is likely to result in increased use of emergency special sessions under the Uniting for Peace mechanism, which has been triggered this year in response to Russia's vetoes over Security Council action relating to its invasion to Ukraine. If the Council enlargement is to take place, the most likely path to success is by expanding the number of non-permanent seats, possibly allowing for consecutive terms. Amendment of UN Charter is very unlikely, as it has happened very rarely and is a very long and complicated process. And finally, even when there is not much perspective for the reforms in Security Council in near future, the way situation could be resolved is when all countries will pass the age of national, regional interests first and enter the age of the world security and peace first. UN Security Council already has clear goal, the maintenance of international peace and security, and should follow the Article 33 in Chapter 6, seek a solution by negotiation, inquiry, mediation, negotiation, arbitration, judicial settlement, or other peaceful means. Solution lies not in reforms, but in upholding the UN Charter. Thank you for your attention.
Well, excellent presentation, Avo. Very rich and full. You've covered a lot of ground, and I think this is very useful for anyone kind of looking at the UN, scratching their heads of why the UN can't be more effective. And as you said, it kind of is an institution that charter was established 1945, and the leading powers of World War II kind of drafted the charter, and the veto of the P5 was the only way to get then the Soviet Union and the US to both agree to establishing the UN. The League failed because major powers started to withdraw. So the good news of the UN is
Yes.
it's held together, but it has so many unsatisfactory points as you have so well indicated. Do you see any hope in this? You referred to a kind of a regional system, and I'm sure it's also important, as you said, if India were proposed as a new member state, as you indicated, China would oppose that. They have border disputes with India, and Pakistan would support that. We've even seen this when NGOs come before the ECOSOC committee. If that NGO seems to have any history with some unfavorable advocacy toward a particular nation, then that application may be blocked. What do you think about this regional approach? Idealistic?
Well, as I mentioned also that this idea of let's have 12 different regions like North Korea, Europe, and Asia, and etc. I myself don't think it's very realistic because, again, as I mentioned, that the UN consists not regions but the members. And again, if it would be 12 regions, then again, who would be the representative? There is so much rivalry, and as I mentioned, so many countries are just blocking each other. So, I mean, the idea is that UN is about peace, but as you see that once it becomes the narrow-mindedness creeps in, then, all this idea of international peace, let's work toward peace, it's somehow, they are forgotten somehow because the international interest becomes somehow more important. So, yeah. So I would say that, again, as I also mentioned, that the UN Charter already actually has good points, just it must be followed.
I think you captured the issues extremely well. The challenges we face, the national interest, which is related to national sovereignty, and that you don't surrender national sovereignty when you become a member state, and therefore having a international organization like the UN that simply serves the common good of humanity is a big challenge. Well, we'll come back. I'm sure there are questions already lining up that will bring us back to this topic. I want to move on to our next speaker. I'm very happy to introduce a good and longtime friend. We've worked together for many years in various parts of the world, particularly in South Asia and Southeast Asia. He is none other than the Honorable Eknath Dakal, has served in the ministry within the government of Nepal and a member of parliament. And we're proud that he's also studying at HJI. So I'd like to welcome for our second speaker, the Honorable Eknath Dakal.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Walsh, the president of HJI. And good day to you all, ladies and gentlemen. So today I am honored to present on the topic of progress and challenges with the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, the case study of Nepal. So I will be covering in my presentation, I'll touch on some context, some efforts and challenges, and finally some recommendation. Let me share my slides so that you can follow with me. Yeah, Nepal is a landlocked country in South Asia with diverse cultural heritage. The population is about 30 million. Is characterized by different ethnicities, religion, and languages. So Nepal's path has been marked by significant milestones from overcoming a monarchy to establishing a democracy, republic, and only in 2015, we have established a new constitution. So political instability has significantly impacted the country's economic development, leaving the economy underdeveloped. This instability is intertwined with social and economic conditions that affect daily life, particularly for disadvantaged groups such as women and indigenous community. In its 15th development plan, Nepal claims that it is striving to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, integrating them into development programs at various government levels. This approach emphasizes inclusivity in development. The nation aims to achieve middle income status by 2030, reflecting ambitious socio-economic growth targets. While recognizing that most, if not all, sustainable development goals are interconnected, so my presentation will be focusing on two SDGs, which are SDG 4, the quality education, and SDG 5, then gender equality. So according to United Nations, SDG 4 means ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all, while SDG 5 means achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. While access to education in Nepal has improved compared to before, with the number of schools being built, as well as increased encouragement of girls attending school, Nepal still faces a lot of problems. One of these is preference among students to pursue higher education abroad. There is a lack of trust among Nepalese citizens in the education quality within the country. Therefore, a lot of them strive to send their children abroad. Furthermore, some parents in rural areas do not see the point of education in everyday life and employment. Aside from this, Nepal faces challenges like poor coordination between stakeholders and the digital age demands. Yet the resilience in pursuing educational reforms is evident through government initiatives and the impactful work of NGOs like the Women's Federation for World Peace and Plan International. WFWP contributed to quality education in Nepal by increasing access to school and facilities. In 2017, the ECOSOC NGO built its second Hope School in Nepal. Another notable effort is Plan International's STEAM Ahead project, which is focused on enhancing the learning environment in school to support students' aspiration. So another critical area is gender equality. Despite educational advancement ensuring gender equality since 1990, disparities persist, especially in citizenship, property, and inheritance rights. The 2015 Constitution made strides by highlighting women's rights and setting representation quotas. In Nepal, 33% of seats in the parliament are reserved for women. This is an effort from the government to strengthen women representation. However, certain provisions still face criticism for gender discrimination. Collaborations such as those between the Asian Development Bank and the Nepalese government shows promise in tackling issues related to gender equality. Focus on eliminating gender-based disadvantage and inequality. It was particularly significant in empowering women from ethnic minorities and low caste groups who face compounded disadvantages. This project was able to achieve several results, such as women becoming more economically active. Furthermore, marginalized women are now engaging in community roles previously inaccessible to them, elevating their domestic workload. Additionally, their rights have been enhanced through improved legal knowledge, accessible dispute resolution, and ownership of personal documentation. This is an example of how the partnership between civil society and the government can contribute towards the attainment of sustainable development goals. Addressing SDGs in Nepal come with set of challenges. First, being resistant to change. In the case of gender equality, though deep-rooted cultural attitudes that lead to unequal treatment can be difficult to address and transform. From a Western perspective, certain practices may be deemed as backward, but it is difficult to change these, especially when these are rooted in culture and religion. Another challenge is the weak institution present in Nepal. This poses a problem, especially in the implementation of policies in support of SDGs, because while the policies work on paper, it is not always translated into proper implementation. Of course, the lack of digitalization technology also poses a significant challenge. Another challenge that can be faced when conducting projects through partnership is the lack of cooperation or proper communication between the local party as well as representatives from international organizations. It is also possible for cultural difference and sensitivities to cause rifts between partnerships. Nepal is a Hindu country and has relatively traditional and conservative values. Especially in the rural areas, it would be possible that outside intervention can be deemed as interference and an act of offense toward traditional Nepali culture. This highlights the need for a multifaceted approach to overcome these obstacles. Based on the context, progress and challenges discussed, my recommendation is as follows. First, is for NGO and civil society to recognize the pivotal role they play in support of SDGs. By working at the grassroots level, these organizations can help address gender inequalities in local contexts and ensure that women's voices are heard in decision-making progress. However, it is crucial that NGO and civil society practice community engagement before attempting to implement projects. The government of Nepal must strengthen its institutions and embrace digitalization to address the digital divide. The government should also create and implement policies modeled after the best practice of other states, such as establishing a stable and transparent political environment, making technology more accessible, especially in rural areas, and enhancing the capacity of government institutions at all levels. Finally, furthermore, enhanced collaboration among the government, private sector, and civil society and faith-based organizations can specifically advance the SDGs in Nepal, making development more context-specific and resource-efficient. Faith-based organization can contribute to the SDGs through its influential role in changing attitudes and perception within Nepalese society. Overall, since the challenges faced by Nepal towards achieving SDGs are multifaceted, and increased collaboration among these different parties can be instrumental in supporting sustainable development goals. Nepal has gone through significant progress in the past few decades, despite facing several obstacles such as political turmoil, earthquakes, and the pandemic. While challenges may still arise in the future, the presence of a strong framework such as those presented in collaboration between the United Nations and Nepal as the testament for both parties to work towards achieving sustainable development goals within the nation. The presence of this commitment encourages both the UN and the government of Nepal to work in collaboration to uplift the quality of life and well-being of the Nepali people. So I conclude my remarks here, Dr. Walsh.
Thank you very much, Honorable Eknath. It's really good to bring this from the very broad and global and addressing issues of the Charter of the UN to a kind of a case study that addresses what is a central part of the UN's agenda, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And I guess I have 2 points and see if you would like to comment on either. On one hand, I'd like to hear from you what it's like to be in Nepal. You're kind of wedged in between India and China geographically, and wonder if the power of China and to some extent India, even the United States, does that impact Nepal's efforts either favorably or unfavorably? Part 1. And part 2 of my comment question is you kind of exemplify this idea of partnership between civil society and the government sector. You've been Minister of Peace and Reconstruction, and you've served in the Parliament, and you have been and continue to be a leader of the Universal Peace Federation. I know your wife, Blessy, has worked actively with Women's Fed. And do you see progress being made? What's it like trying to get some of these reforms or the agenda that you outlined actually taken up by the Parliament and by the government?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Walsh. In the past, it was saying in Nepal is that Nepal is sweet potatoes between 2 stones, like between India and China. When the socialist group, they used to say, we are not sweet potatoes, we are dynamite between 2 stones. Anyway, I think it is quite challenge a small state like Nepal to make balance between 2 big neighbors, India and China, because India is culturally, traditionally, historically very close with Nepal. We share many common things. Even our 70% trade is with India, and also many Nepalese and Indians, they marry each other. And also China is also one of the biggest donor, biggest development partner for Nepal. So we can see, depend on the government changes, sometimes like the government more inclined with China, sometimes with India. However, among the people, there is a common view that Nepal should have balanced relation between India and China. So in terms of the partnership, I presented that when I case studies, some of when there is a good partnership between the government, between the civil society, faith-based organization, organization and civil society is excluded, in partnership with UN or government. So such projects are not really effective, and they are not, people are not taking ownership. So that's why I think the one of the agenda that the Universal Peace Federation also has been advocating to really promote partnership between government, civil society, and faith-based organization. This is really effective model even for United Nations to recognize and to work together, because the faith leaders are really very influential. They have a respect, they have a root in their strategy and then their plan to implement their project.
Yeah.
To bring better outcome.
Yeah,
if the amount of resources that you invest, the outcome is not really really greater. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll come back to that later, but it's a good transition topic to our next speaker, Marlies Ledstetter, who will speak to us about an NGO, faith-based organization, and her title is The Role of Faith-Based Organizations at the UN, the Case of World Vision International. Marlies?
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Walsh, dear distinguished ladies and gentlemen. So today I want to talk about the role of faith-based organizations at the United Nations, as Dr. Walsh mentioned. And yes, despite the fact that 85% of the global population adheres to a religious belief system, somehow the UN has maintained an unsatisfactory connection with religions. And along with its peace and security focus, the UN has a more liberal secular agenda on various justice and human rights issues. When we talk about faith-based organizations, there are NGOs rooted in a religious or spiritual vision. FBOs promote human rights, humanitarian aid, development initiatives, peace building, and social justice. They also provide valuable perspectives, grassroots support, and on-the-ground assistance in addressing global challenges. When we look at faith-based organizations at the United Nations, we can see, or also religions, we can see that the Holy See, you all know of it, the governing body of the Roman Catholic Church, they have actually a permanent observer status since 6th of April 1964. Also, two other big faith-based organizations are the World Council of Churches and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. There are actually 3,700 NGOs registered at the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, and 10% of them are faith-based organizations. 58% of these 10% are Christians, 16% are Muslim, 9% are Jewish, 9% 4% are Buddhist, and the rest are multi-religious or spiritual-based organizations. There are actually 6 qualities that are all common in faith-based organizations. And there is, first, one is the recognition of the sanctity of life. Faith really grasps the sanctity, respect, and transcends of each individual. Second is the network strength. Faith really leverages robust and enduring local and global networks. 3 is the moral conscience. Faith communities advocate for the impoverished, especially during humanitarian crises. Faith also provides hope and adversity. Faith is also the theology of compassion and forgiveness is at the core, and this is often capable of breaking even cycles of violence. And the 6th quality of FBOs is altruism. This promotes sustainable giving based on values rather than on compelled or tax-based contributions. So what do actually faith-based organizations do at the United Nations? So that they participate through various channels and especially through specialized agencies, programs, initiatives at the United Nations. They engage in dialogue, advocacy effort, and partnerships and applying voices, which are based on their moral and ethical principles. They focus in developing countries on projects in healthcare, education, poverty alleviation, and conflict resolution. And a study shows actually people trust faith-based organizations mainly due to their religious affiliation, and this can actually be more effective in implementing projects than, for example, than other NGOs. Also, faith-based organizations are committed to promote peace, justice, and sustainable development from a faith-based perspective. Let me now talk about World Vision International. This is one of the largest faith-based organizations at the United Nations. It is a Christian relief, development, and advocacy organization dedicated to work with children, families, and their communities to reach their full potential by tackling the root cause of poverty and injustice. They are an economical Christian organization and is founded in 1947 by actually Bob Pierce, who gave his last $5 to a Chinese abandoned child, and 3 years later he founded World Vision. When we look at the numbers of World Vision, we can see they have an annual income of $3.2 billion. They spend $1.7 million on development programs, $967 million on relief and rehabilitation programs, and $27 million on community education and advocacy. Why is actually the United Nations so important for World Vision? The UN really serves as a central point for advocacy efforts for World Vision. Also, especially the UN holds a big significance as it is the largest intergovernmental organization and comprises 193 member states. Its primary global focal point is global policy, and there are also many other faith-based organizations with formal representation within the UN through the ECOSOC status. And World Vision at the United Nations do mainly address immediate, medium, and long-term development necessities of most marginalized and disadvantaged groups in the global south. They also encourage civil society, boost grassroots participation, and aim to improve the quality of life for the most impoverished and vulnerable groups. And what does World Vision do at the United Nations as well? They have mainly 4 approaches to sway public opinion and engagement in the involvement of children and youth in various agendas. They, for example, they form partnerships, alliances, and coalitions. They do advocacy work, they have direct interaction with policymakers and media and communication efforts. One of the main agenda that they participated at the United Nations was the Global Strategy for Women and Children's Health. Here, various NGOs, faith-based organizations, and UN bodies were involved in this project, especially in addressing the global South, and then addressing especially the development and also advocacy efforts and the development of children and women's rights, and also development. When we can see also, especially through this program, the World Vision was chosen as one of the only members of a faith-based organization to be part of the high-level advisory group, which usually is where only UN commissions are members, or former members of parliament. So this is a really high effort they could achieve. And also World Vision, they help implement the Sustainable Development Goals. And then we can ask ourselves, what methods does World Vision use to drive at the United Nations? So mainly they do side events. Side events are like events that are usually during formal UN programs, but are activities organized by NGOs or faith-based organizations. And they are like during the Commission's main events, and through these side events, NGOs and faith-based organizations can really bring the voice and engage also member states, permanent missions, and so bring awareness through media and also civil society, as they can engage different participants in these side events. Of course, one of also the important facts is to include permanent missions to the UN as partners at these side events, and then also then FBOs and NGOs can host side events at the United Nations building itself, while usually they have to host it outside of the UN building. But also through permanent missions, of course, also the side event becomes more recognized and also brings more media attention and awareness through civil society. And in concluding, I want to say that faith-based organizations engage in dialogue, advocacy efforts, and partnerships by amplifying voices which are often grounded in moral and ethical principles. Faith-based organizations focus in developing countries on projects on healthcare, education, poverty, alleviation, and conflict resolutions. FBOs help in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals on local levels through projects and network. And as I said, studies have shown that people trust faith-based organizations due to their religious affiliation and therefore can be more effective in implementing the projects. And faith-based organizations at the United Nations also reflect a commitment to promote peace, justice, and sustainable development from a faith-based perspective. And hence, there should be a shift from moving away from a solely secular standpoint in addressing issues, and with a more religious values approach, and which is also widely acknowledged as potentially advantageous for relationships between different groups and communities. And hence, the UN also should include faith-based organizations and religions more in the decision-making and also in their agendas. So this is my short overview of this, and I thank you very much for the attention.
Well, thank you, Marlies. This is a great contribution to this conversation, that you, just like Honorable Ecknoth, a case study of a member state and its efforts, and you've turned our attention to the civil society sphere or the NGO sphere, and as you indicated, among the 3,000 plus NGOs associated or affiliated in consultative status with the Economic and Social Council, 10%, or roughly 370 are faith-based. And as you spoke, I continually kind of compare, well, that's kind of like UPF, or that's a little bit like Women's Fed. So I think it's good for many of us and many in our audience, I believe, to kind of see, this pattern. Now, that's a pretty nice budget, 3.2 billion. I think we would all like to operate at that level. We're not quite there yet, but in terms of the overview, there's a lot of similarity. And I guess one of the issues, because this is a faith-based organization, and as you recall, in our course, we kind of talked about faith-based organization and kind of faith-inspired, because one of the issues when faith-based organizations are working at the UN, of course, as you indicated, they're not there to proclaim their theology. They're not there as preachers and traditional witnessers for conversion, but usually finding this space, this overlapping sphere of common ground, like development issues, protecting women and children. Would you say that's your experience as well, that the function of World Vision, even though it's a kind of a quiet witness to the Christian love, is evidenced in that it's not continually proclaimed, and therefore you must come to Jesus or something like that? Would you care to comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, World Vision is not there they're not like proclaiming, okay, this is, we all have to follow Jesus or something through their programs, or like especially not at the United Nations and their development programs. I think the focus is really more on the values that the organization stands for, like on really, really bringing children and women more to this, as I mentioned, the 6 qualities of faith-based organizations. This is not a direct religious approach, to preach about you should follow this Messiah or you should follow this person, but it's more about standing behind the values. And I think this is also, what I can observe with UPF, Women's Federation, YSP, it's really the values that you teach. And I think this is also what World Vision does. And I think this is, as you mentioned, the aim is not to say, okay, you should follow this, but it's more to live and to show what you can do, the values that you teach, to really, how to really practice them in their kind of programs or things. So I think this is really valuable, and I could learn a lot from World Vision, as I feel like myself, even organizing, conference side events or UN conferences, I really feel like I could learn a lot. And as you mentioned, it's really not the focus to preach about who they are, about Jesus or about Mohammed or something like that.
Yeah, and it's one of the terms in a course I'm teaching now. We're looking at a book that's talking about issues in contemporary Christianity and how to grow the church in challenging times. And one of the concepts is kind of relational Christianity, which is not quite totally focusing on this set of doctrines, but really building kind of like friendships and partnerships and close bonds of humanity. And maybe that can lead to a deeper kind of sense of some deep insights to the nature of reality and how history has evolved from a faith perspective. Anyway, it's fascinating, and I think helpful for some, perhaps in our audience and the general public, even as this recording is on our YouTube site, that the faith-based work at the UN is really finding this area in human rights or development or women and children, sustainable development, the things even that Honorable Eknal was talking about, gender equality and improved education. And because these are expressions of our own life of faith. So totally consistent with it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
come back to some of this discussion, and we'll move to our final speaker. I'm very happy to welcome John Kester, who is going to speak to us also in the civil society sphere about empowering NGOs at the UN, strategic insights to attain relevance. John also did an internship at the United Nations as part of his peace studies curriculum. And looking forward to hearing from you, John. So your bio is in the chat column for those viewing today. And John, let's hear from you. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. It is a pleasure to be here today. I will jump right in. So my presentation is on the strategic insights that NGOs could implement to not only attain greater relevance to advocate their agenda, but also become more effective as a whole. First, I seek to outline the benefits of connecting with the UN, drawing insights from specific NGOs, namely Pax Christi and the Universal Peace Federation, then highlighting the role of faith-based organizations, and lastly, identifying opportunities for NGOs amidst evolving global challenges. Globally, it is estimated that there are 10 million NGOs worldwide. This number reflects a growing recognition of the importance of civil society as NGOs have sought to address the challenges in recent decades. I first want to lay the groundwork for my presentation. This begins with acknowledging why civil society is needed and the challenges it experiences. According to Paul Kennedy, the main instruments to deal with the effects of globalization are still the nation structures that are all too familiar to us, but are entirely incapable of confronting our modern reality. This is why there has been such a self-mobilization of international civil society via the NGOs. However, countries will resist until perhaps sheer necessity forces a change. International human rights organizations such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have played a crucial role in supporting the UN's efforts to safeguard and advance human rights. Through activities like documenting violations, conducting fact-finding missions, or advocating for necessary actions, these NGOs have been pivotal in bringing attention to abuses and compelling states to address them. Their relentless efforts were crucial to the establishment of the International Criminal Court, or ICC, or the adoption of the international ban on landmines. Without their dedicated work, these achievements might not have materialized. When states cannot compel another to address a specific issue, NGOs can succeed over time through exerting a prolonged influence both internally and externally on the state. Now, I want to establish why it is important for NGOs to work with the UN. This is not entirely obvious, as some have adopted differing viewpoints on the UN. Speaking from my own personal experience, when I entered at the UN, I first saw the impact NGOs can have at the UN. This institution relies on NGOs to advocate for them and support them in addressing relevant issues. Civil society has an increasing role to play in deciding which direction we go. In many ways, NGOs have a powerful influence, and sometimes people listen to NGOs more than they do to their own governments. This is why the UN depends on NGOs for their support. Consultative status represents the primary means as to how civil society can connect to the UN and present their voice. The fact that only 6,500 NGOs have such a status with the UN among the 10 million plus NGOs worldwide speaks to how challenging it can be to acquire it, or perhaps collaborating with the UN is looked at unfavorable. The reality is that there are political agendas present at the UN that are leading to certain organizations being denied status to their focus area. There is a way around this, as some organizations have demonstrated, through becoming a member of an organization alliance that already has a status. That organization could still participate to some extent. I hope this gives you a very brief picture of the nature of the relationship between NGOs and the UN. Unfortunately, it can be argued that there exists a dichotomy as NGOs navigate international relations, which can be inherently characterized by self-interest, with states competing to advance their national interest. While NGOs typically operate in a nonprofit capacity, it is sometimes the case that they have been perceived to be in competition with states directly. For example, the operation of an NGO in a specific area may reduce cooperation with governmental agencies. Furthermore, there's also rivalry between NGOs that have duplicated activities due to a lack of coordination, leading them to compete for community acceptance. Other problems include failure to share information on past and future efforts, as well as mistrust, which stems from a fear of being held accountable, or a survival instinct among individuals who rely on the organization for employment and survival. Coordination with NGOs can be viewed as a form of control, requiring leadership that may be resisted or questioned by members. These dynamics, rooted in power relations, complicate efforts to operate effectively and address global needs by NGOs. To overcome these challenges that NGOs experience, I want to discuss how it can be useful to examine faith-based organizations. What can NGOs learn from FBOs? A faith-based organization is an entity grounded in faith and beliefs, with a mission rooted in the social values of its specific faith. Typically, it recruits members predominantly from a particular faith community, but it does not seek to evangelize, but rather to find common ground. Let us look at examples of faith-based organizations. Pax Christi is a Catholic peace movement which was founded following World War II to reconcile the French and Germans. It has sought to bring the voice of civil society to the Catholic Church and vice versa. Its priorities reflect a comprehensive approach to promoting peace, collaboration, empowerment, and spiritual growth within the organization and its broader community. Now, specifically, I want to focus on the Dutch chapter of Pax Christi, which is a rather unique case among NGOs and faith-based organizations. Pax is independent, but its mission are monitored by IKV and Pax Christi, two religious organizations, based on two core values, human dignity and solidarity. It does not promote a specific faith, and besides its roots being Catholic, it is and acts as a research advocacy organization. You would never know in looking at this organization by what it is talking about or what it is doing that it has a Catholic foundation. It works on disarmament, investigating violence, providing legal assistance, and even the training of troops. In the past, Pax has played a key role in peace agreements and holding corporations accountable. Additionally, it contributed to the UN Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, resulting in a Nobel Peace Prize in 2017. Similarly, the Universal Peace Federation is a faith-based organization that has sought to promote peace through interfaith peace building, peace education, and strengthening the family. Like other FBOs, UPF shares in its commitment to promoting interfaith dialogue, nonviolent peace building, and collaboration based on shared values and spiritual principles. Faith-based organizations often demonstrate unique strengths and approaches that can mitigate some of the challenges faced by NGOs, including corruption and rivalry. FBO's unique attributes, in my opinion, and in the context of how it can serve NGOs better, are values-based leadership, community trust, cultural sensitivity, focus on collaboration, long-term perspective, and their unique ability to motivate action. Here's one instance of a well-researched aspect of FBOs as to how they can be more effective in local contexts. The key to NGOs is serving with the heart of a parent and shoes of a servant. Cultural sensitivity and humility can be recognized in all religions, engaging in sincere partnerships over personal interests. This is effective as it allows listening and adapting approaches to best suit the evolving needs of the communities they serve. Now I want to draw your attention to this assessment completed in 2011, analyzing the relative advantages between NGOs and FBOs in a specific context. The author suggested that the most important comparative advantage FBOs bring is moral and ethical standing. FBOs were also particularly advantageous by their understanding of local context, their increased flexibility, and their ability to mobilize energy and resources. Of course, FBOs do have disadvantages compared to NGOs, as can be observed here. Before I conclude, I wish to present to you a short series of challenges that the UN currently faces. But where there are challenges for some, opportunities exist for others. Civil society can take a proactive role in advancing a priority of the UN, which provides a channel for NGOs to attain relevance and contribute to an active need that the UN is lacking in. FBOs can engage communities directly, utilize existing relationships, and engage them in raising awareness and promoting their voices. Interestingly, there have been more battle-related deaths in 2022 than in any year since 1984. That is one of the most concerning statistics that I found, but there are a number more suggesting the increase in violence we're experiencing. There are also some more statistics developing from 2023, which haven't been released yet. This, coupled with a decline in UN peacekeeping missions, represents a declining ability of traditional approaches to effectively address conflicts. MINUSMA and MINUSCO referred to the UN peacekeeping missions in Mali and the DRC respectively. Mali ended last year, and the DRC mission is ending later this year. FBOs can connect to the public as they have existing relationships in communities and can utilize the social capital to combat misinformation. The use of communication strategy has become increasingly important to engage the public, raise awareness about a cause, and advocate for change. Lastly, what I have sought to demonstrate is the significance in including faith-based approaches. Moral and ethical perspectives can improve collaboration between actors and contribute to peace-building efforts. And NGOs and faith-based organizations possess unique capabilities to address global challenges that the UN and other actors have struggled to resolve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Excellent presentation, and good to have these back-to-back with Marley's addressing World Vision International and you with the Fox Christie and UPF. You know, as you were speaking, you know, the NGO world in some ways we also can see at first glance looks like, you know, this is the, you know, in unification, as we talk sometimes about Cain and Abel, that the NGO world is the Abel sphere or something. But like in all human institutions, there are, let's call it the undesirable factors. So among those 10 million that you mentioned worldwide, that they're, first of all, the point of that is like, hey, it's not like there's just a handful of these. These are people working all over the world. And fair to say, not all of them are pure and good. And some are strongly agenda-driven in one way or the other. And that's why the ECOSOC does this vetting process. And I've heard complaints about NGOs, you know, they're not elected, that they can kind of form themselves and take on an issue. So NGOs do have to be vetted. The UN does seek to do that. Which leads me to the question of, you know, what we might call the political polarization of NGOs, say within the UN. Like one might even see, like in a broad general view, UPF is somewhat more advocating traditional values, traditional family values, tends to lean heavily in favor of liberal democracy, as where freedom of religion is very robust. And I'm wondering if you saw any kind of political difference, let's say, between, say, a UPF and a Fox Christie, because some of the NGOs that might be more into disarmament might align more progressively. Do you see any hint of that, or did you see this kind of the political factor in the work, even within peacekeeping operations when you interned there?
Thank you for that question. I would say yes. In some sense, I find UPF itself spans globally and doesn't restrict itself from reaching out to certain countries where it might be more hostile to work in. Most NGOs I find, for example, Pax for Peace in the Netherlands focuses more on the Netherlands itself because they're a bit more practical in the sense of where they can really contribute and where they can work on. So certain organizations do try to avoid anything that might cast a negative light on them. They might avoid from connecting to a specific actor because of their reputation. So in that sense, I think they're very, I'd say they're a bit more close-minded on the people that they want to work with.
Yeah. That's yeah. I know that even when I had an executive role at UPF, I would get many emails asking me to take a strong position against this country for what they did here or there, and yet I knew we had our own chapter in that country, so I didn't want to create an awkward situation there because they're trying to survive, and also we have what I would refer to as a long game. We're not reading today's headlines and always taking immediate action, particularly on these political issues, but try to be a facilitator of dialogue. So sometimes that's very good, but you can't please everybody all the time, as they say.
Right,
anyway,
of course.
Great presentation. Why don't we bring our panel out together and let me have a look at our chat box and see what we come up with here. Thank you to our audience for submitting questions. I'll start with Dr. Ron Brown, faculty at HJI. He says the League of Nations was established after the ravages of World War I, and the UN in turn after World War II and the atomic bomb. Do we have to wait for World War III for a new, or we might say, reformed organization? Maybe I'll toss that one to you, Avo. Any thoughts about that? Will it take a third world war to get the Security Council to reform?
Well, I think it's difficult to say yes or no, but I think this is always has been the human responsibility. How do we behave? The reality is that people tend to do something once we are in war. So is this war now in Ukraine and what we see in Middle East now or another places in the world, does it mark a new time and should we hope for some new organizations? Well, let's see. Time will show. So, but again, this is it depends on also world leaders. So, what do we want to do? Do we wait some catastrophe, or do we change now? So it depends on us. So let's hope there will be no war to change it. But surely change should come.
Yeah. So sometimes they say we will change, but only after we've tried every other conceivable way before doing what we ought to do. Anyway, thank you. This goes to Honorable Eknath. Thank you for your great presentation, Honorable Eknath. To what extent does the caste system or the remnants of it have a role in Nepal's sustainable socioeconomic development? This is from Dr. Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Walsh, Dr. Ward. Basically, the caste system has been already eliminated through our legislation. By law, it is totally illegal to discriminate anyone depend on his or her caste. But in practice, especially in the rural areas and uneducated societies, this has been still exist. So that's why I think it is the cultural change. It really takes time, and the more we make efforts, I think the more quickly we can make a change. So that's why, like the Sustainable Development Goal, I think this is very important, especially the role of the non-governmental organizations. I mean, civil society, something like UPF, we see the world as one home and all humankind as one family. So I think such a concept, the concept of family, treating everyone equal. So this concept is really important for Nepal. Thank you.
Let me follow up with you just a minute, because Dr. Izaki in Austria is asking a question. You know, we had a session yesterday on the family in the United Nations, and we heard about the different points of view, what we might call a more progressive agenda that some member states with a lot of capacity and resources are advocating. But this question from Dr. Izaki in Austria: gender equality implies, he says, the inclusion of transgenders and promoting LGBT, etc. What's your viewpoint on this? So sorry to put you on the spot there, but I'm sure this issue also is raised in Nepal.
Yeah, I think this progressive agendas has been now discussed even in Nepal. Even though in Nepal we do not form law for kind of same-sex marriage or for the rights of LGBTQI, but through a special order from a court, actually recently one same-sex marriage was registered in Nepal. And before that, just last week in Thailand, they made a new law, and in Taiwan, these are some countries where getting these progressive agendas. But when we talk about gender equality, I think we have to go back to our original root. God has created two gender, the male and female. I think it is also mentioned in the Bible. So that's why when we talk about gender equality, we should more focus on the equality between male and female. Of course, we should also respect the rights of all everyone.
Yeah.
But in the framework of gender equality, if we try to bring other aspect than men and women, I think we will go kind of like out of track. So it will be we'll bring on like kind of unsolvable issues in our table. So we have to be a little bit careful about it.
Yeah. We've got a couple of questions here. One from William Ketzier, who's referring to our founder's vision of a peace UN or able UN, and a somewhat related question from Peter May, also about the Interreligious Council at the United Nations. Maybe I'll put this to Marlies and John, since you've talked more about the faith-based side. What do you think of this idea that would integrate more directly? Of course, faith-based NGOs were in San Francisco in the drafting of the charter. They were there kind of with their own vision, even at the League of Nations time. So it's religions or faith-based are not alien to the UN project, broadly speaking. But they've never been installed in a kind of way that the five principal organs of the UN are: the Security Council, Secretariat, ECOSOC, General Assembly, and what was called or is called the Trusteeship Council. Any thoughts on is that a good idea, and is it feasible to implement, just like charter change?
I guess it will be somehow difficult to implement, but of course it would be very like how I would see it or I could imagine it working is like as the Holy See has this permanent mission, right? So and permanent observer status at all, even like the General Assemblies. And I think like an interreligious council should have also this especially. And I think it also could be feasible because through this, they can really consult on important issues. And as we can see now, I mean, the UN has many issues they cannot deal with. I mean, besides the Security Council, so they cannot stop these issues. But I think including like an interreligious council would really be helpful and useful. So the question, of course, how fast it can go. I mean, I think it will take time when it can be established. And the question is if the United Nations will allow it soon. But I do hope that they will grant some kind of more, as they can see maybe more the role and the importance of faith-based organizations and interreligious councils that they have in the world to establish this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. John, you want to add anything?
Yes, I agree with Marlies. As you mentioned, the permanent mission of the Holy See represents one entity that is already well ingrained into the UN. There's also the United Church of the United Nations across from the Secretariat, where at the beginning of every General Assembly, the heads of the member states, they gather at this church to pay their respects. So I think religion is very much already respected, and it's more respected in many countries and different regions of the world. So it may take time, but religion is already firmly present at the UN.
Yeah. Think of some of the secretaries general, like Dag Hammarskjöld was a devout spiritual man and was very emphatic about setting up the kind of prayer meditation room at the UN. And U Thant was a Buddhist, and he would actually hold morning or kind of devotions at times with readings of scriptures. So it has been there. It is true that it hasn't been directly institutionalized, shall we say, within the system. We have a comment from Joe Racinos. The UN is a secular organization, and getting involved with faith-based NGOs will create additional conflicts. Noble idea, but not realistic. And I think that's a fair statement because, as we know, just like nation states are not always well-behaved, we could also identify instances where religions aren't always well-behaved and have their own internal disputes and disagreements. And you'd also have the issue of major religions and minority religions. Where would, for example, the Family Federation fit into a scheme like that relative to 1 billion Roman Catholics and 1 billion Muslims and 1 billion Hindus and that? So it's a great idea, and we continue to aspire to that, but it faces its challenges. Also, Sofal Chamrum.
You are muted, Dr. Walsh.
Oops. Was I just muted, or was I muted for a long time?
Just for seconds.
Okay. I hope I wasn't muted the whole program. No, thank you. Let's see. Here's another one for Marley. How did you this is from Merle Barlan. How did you classify UN-accredited NGOs as faith-based? Is it by who their founders are, or by their objectives and the activities, or the accreditation? I guess I would add to Marley's question, are they self-identified as faith-based?
Mm-hmm. So I guess, as you mentioned, they usually self-identify themselves as faith-based organizations. So when they say they're like, that's their vision and that's their their identity, then they would classify themselves as a faith-based organization. I don't think anyone else can just claim them as faith-based organization. I think they would just claim themselves as a faith-based organization because, they even, like, as you mentioned, like even, some other NGOs might be, they are more like NGOs, but they might have actually a religious background, but they don't classify themselves anymore as faith-based organizations. So yeah, this is more like they identify themselves as a faith-based organization.
I want to take some question and comments from Dr. Victor Insu Kim from the Sanak UP Graduate University in Korea. And he addresses it to Ms. Ladstetter. Thank you for your valuable research and presentation, especially when you're presenting your conclusion. He said, I had some questions about Reverend Moon's NGOs, such as Women's Fed, which became General Consultative Stat 1997, UPF 2018, IAYSP 2022, which I prefer to call the peace NGOs because they are established based on peace philosophy. He's asking how our current situation of what he's defining as peace NGOs as distinct from faith-based NGOs. And can we examine the current peace NGOs at the UN according to your conclusion? I guess he's asking, how about this concept of peace NGO? And maybe, John, you're welcome to comment there. Dr. Kim also points out that our data about the number of NGOs at the UN may not be current. So you can look in the chat column for his, and he gives a nice link there. But comments from any of our panel on the point that Dr. Kim is making about using this category peace NGOs. Any takers? Well, I think if I can start with something just to say that there are categories when they do categorize where are NGOs who are affiliated with the UN working. Some are involved with particular SDGs, some are involved with human rights, some are involved with disarmament, conflict resolution. So these are all peace categories. Dr. Kim, also, we would, of course, have to kind of define peace, because another uniqueness about Father and Mother Moon is that peace is a word that refers to God's ultimate ideal, that we all live together in universal harmony. So it's a broad category. So
I can just comment maybe on International Association on Youth and Students for Peace, as I'm also involved with them. And as I can say, like, this is really a peace NGO, and we are registered since 2022 at the UN, the ECOSOC status. And I would really classify this as a peace NGO, and we do various projects on character education and really inspire young people to bring also to do peace projects themselves. So as I would say, as you mentioned, like you asked me about the conclusion, and I would say, like, this is really what YSP does, really, to inspire youth and to really not just talk about it, but also try to really implement them with the students themselves. So really to empower them to become their own peacemakers. And also to do different service projects in different areas, also environmental projects, cleanup projects. So I think this is really something I would say, really also the values that we teach about, like, accountability, integrity. I think this is really something responsibility. This is something that as a peace NGO, really VIII can do. And I think this is really, I think this can be really also valuable to the United Nations, as it's not just a secular, but more really also internal point of also for, especially for youth, to see there's more than just a secular world. Yeah, this is my comment to this. Thank you.
Very good. I think we're going to have to conclude with that. Thank you, Dr. Kim, for the wonderful question and the input about the data on NGOs, which is also very helpful and well taken. I'm going to give you each 45 seconds to just say a final word. Just go around. Maybe start with you, Avo, go to Honorable Eknath, to Marley and John.
Yeah, thank you again very much for this panel. And so my presentation was about reforming UN Security Council. So even though the perspective is quite grim, but I think still this idea that for a healthy human being, mind should lead, not body should lead. So I think it also, we can say, in family, in society. So I hope that finally the mind basically will dominate the body, but of course mind and body will need together. So it means that Interreligious Council and Security Council need to work together. I think only then we can talk about peace. So other ways, external way, it doesn't work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avo. Great job today. Honorable Eknath.
Yeah, thank you. I think very interactive session, and I feel UN really need help, and together we can make difference. I think still the UN has a lot of few prospect in the world, but I think UN need help from all of us, not only government, also NGOs and civil society and faith-based organization.
Thank you, sir.
Let's work together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Marley?
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful session, also for having me here. And I think really the role of faith-based organizations at the United Nations is very important, as we can see from the secular point, more like into internal point, and to really share values and to really also inspire young people, but also like to bring more an internal point and value-based approach into the whole UN system. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Marley. John?
Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to end by shortly summarizing my presentation. Again, saying that faith-based organizations do not evangelize. They are inspired by their values to carry out humanitarian work, research, and advocacy. The fact of the matter is that there's conflict already present within the UN between member states and NGOs, which is inhibiting progress between member states and NGOs. FBOs possess, they share values that, in my opinion, lead to less conflict overall and increased collaboration. Thank you.
This concludes our program. I thank our four excellent panelists. I think those who worked, Ms. Baczynski and Ms. Eden, for the tech work behind the scenes for today's program, and our wonderful audience, some 73 of you, for tuning in. We will have this on the YouTube site of HJI. Our next session starts in about 25 minutes. Please stay tuned. That's an important session that will be moderated by Dr. Drisa Kone, with a very fine panel of speakers that includes a dear colleague and friend, Bishop Munib Yunan, and others. So hope you'll join us for that. Will be our final main session of this conference. Thank you. God bless you. And see you soon at session 9.